And good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Ritter of Channel 7, WABC TV, Eyewitness News, and this is the countdown, election edition for the 2020 race for the White House. We are broadcasting the countdown on all of our digital platforms under the umbrella heading of ABC7 NY, and I welcome you once again to the countdown. Tomorrow, of course, Super Tuesday, a make-or-break day for several of the dwindling remaining Democratic candidates. Joining me tonight to discuss the impact of tomorrow's primaries and today's incredible developments, Rick Klein, political director for ABC News. He's on the left. Nathaniel Rakish with 538.com. He's on the right. And in the middle, familiar face to Eyewitness News viewers, Christine Quinn, the vice chair of the New York State Democratic Committee and former speaker of the New York City Council. Before I get to you all, let's give a quick overview of Super Tuesday and where we stand heading into it. First, 14 states will hold primaries tomorrow. The two states with the most delegates to offer, California and Texas, they are also voting tomorrow. They've been doing early voting as well. California has, for sure. 1,357 delegates up for grabs. That represents about a third of the delegates needed for a candidate to secure the nomination, give or take a few. And the field of candidates narrowing in the last 2 days, including this afternoon. Former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg dropping out of the race last night, and just hours ago, Senator Amy Klobuchar ended her campaign. She's expected to appear at a rally in Dallas tonight with former Vice President Biden. So is the former Mayor Buttigieg. They are going to endorse Mr. Biden. The decisions come after disappointing finishes in the South Carolina primary this week, where Biden had a huge win with 48% of the vote, more than 200%. The second place finisher, Senator Bernie Sanders. He finished second with 20%. Here's what the delegate count stands right now. Sanders leads with 60 delegates. Biden is not far behind with 53. And now the question, what will happen to Buttigieg's 26? And the unknown factor tomorrow. Setting this all up for our discussion, former Mayor Michael Bloomberg from New York is on the ballot for the first time. He has the highest numbers in another important category. Money. $60 billion worth of it. And he is going to spend a couple billion if he continues. We don't know. Let's begin our discussion. Rick, who would have thought we would be sitting here the night before Super Tuesday with such a narrowing field of candidates and such big development?
What a wild 48 hours. You go from Joe Biden being essentially counted out to bringing back his campaign to life and then having two major candidates drop out and endorse the former vice president. His fortunes have changed and the whole contours of this primary have changed in just the shortest amount of time. And I'm looking forward to a day tomorrow where we're probably not going to know who the nominee is, but we're definitely going to know what kind of nomination fight we have, whether it's just a two-person fight or if it's 3 or 4 with Senator Warren and Mayor Bloomberg in the mix as well.
And not just any two people, Christine, dropping out. Two people who are in the quote-unquote middle of the road as Democrats, who were sort of vying for those votes with Biden, and the same voters vying for that Mr. Bloomberg is vying for.
That's true. I mean, I think Saturday was a great day for Joe Biden. I mean, the definition of a comeback kid. It was a bad day for Mike Bloomberg because almost all of his strategy is based on that Joe Biden would totally and utterly collapse. Joe put it all on South Carolina, called it his firewall, and he was right and Bloomberg is wrong. So Bloomberg doesn't go into Super Tuesday where they have all of their chips up. He goes in down, and his second debate performance was better than the first, but it wasn't great. So I think things really have changed for Mike Bloomberg in a way that he didn't anticipate. I
want to get to you in a second, Nathaniel, but I want to continue this discussion about the political part of this first. What does this mean for Mr. Bloomberg? Before I go into Biden, Mr. Bloomberg does not want to be a quitter. He's just getting into this.
Right.
He has not been on one ballot, as you said, and he wants to feel that a little bit. If he doesn't get anything, does he have much choice here?
Well, look, if he does surprisingly well in California, then he can parlay that into.
But Sanders is supposed to do surprisingly well.
But if somehow we have a surprise in California, I think Bloomberg could have another day. I really think what's going to be the case on Wednesday is how poorly did Bloomberg do? And with what he has, how much longer can he keep this going? But I want us to remember, Michael Bloomberg has said win or lose the nomination. He's keeping his offices open. He's keeping his people in place. He's spending the amount of money he would have spent on himself on the nominee. And that is an extraordinary commitment from someone.
His ads today, Rick, that he put out here in New York, where he's spending a lot of money.
Yes.
He is spending a lot of money looking to April 28th. He wants to win New York. I don't think there's any question about that. He says, it was very interesting. He said, you know, he's a doer. He may not be a debater, but he's a doer, which was a new ad because he didn't do so great in the debates. But you know what? Neither did a man named Joe Biden. And look where he is right now.
Though he did better. He got
Bloomberg
better.
did.
No,
Biden
no,
did.
Biden got better.
did,
And
yeah.
Biden's debate before South Carolina was the best of all of them. He peaked at, his peak may not have been as high as we wanted, but it was at the right time.
I think that's exactly right. And I think the question that's going to be asked for a long time if Bloomberg doesn't overperform tomorrow is, did they make a mistake by participating in those early debates?
That's a good question.
We had 2 debates that happened in states that he did not even qualify for the ballot on. He didn't even try to qualify for. He didn't have to show up. We could be getting the first real glimpse of him tomorrow.
And he fought to show up.
Yeah, they wanted it. They decided after the chaos of the first 2 contests that this was their moment. They had to strike. And it appears to have been a miscalculation. Now, we'll see tomorrow because if the numbers back him up, his campaign told me months ago, Super Tuesday is when they start to put points on the board. And they're going to do it probably not winning a single state. No. They're going to go to congressional districts, start to compile some numbers here, and their hope is that they can just accumulate enough to be part of the conversation.
But the mathematics is always the mathematics. The numbers don't change, and so that's the question when you look at everybody.
Fortunately, we have a numbers guy here from 538, the elections analyst.
Yeah, so Rick, to your point, you know, the interesting question is what Bloomberg's measure of success will be. He may not win every state, but he could finish second, third in enough states like California to win delegates. And I think it's been clear, frankly, from the beginning that Bloomberg's strategy has been force a contested convention where he can either be the kingmaker or be a compromise candidate, because it just didn't make a lot of sense for him to be skipping the first 4 states to vote, knowing that there were going to be winners from that contest that were going to have momentum.
And Nathaniel, on that point, you've done some of the odds on this, right?
Yeah.
And
so
what have you found?
We at 538, have a running forecast model for basically who's going to win the nomination. Technically, it's who's going to win the most delegates.
What are the odds of securing the nomination?
So right now, there's a 2 in 3 chance that no one will get a majority of delegates, which in a lot of cases leads to a contested convention. And those chances have just been going up and up and up after South Carolina. Obviously with Biden emerging as this big kind of counterbalance to Sanders, they went up. After Buttigieg dropped out, they went up. After Klobuchar dropped out, they went up. So it's very likely that we could have a contested convention. And in the event of a contested convention, it looks like it's basically even between Sanders and Biden right now in terms of getting the most delegates, not necessarily a majority. We have their chances about even.
I'm very worried about as a Democrat, I'm very worried about a brokered convention.
You don't think it would be fun?
Well, I'm a DNC, I'm a superdelegate, so I believe therell be a lot of courting of moi, but no, I do not think.
It'll be very popular.
Very popular.
Because why? It doesn't show a combined strategy, the coalescing of all the forces. They didn't do it with Republicans. Look what happened.
But also, and I may get nasty tweets about this, the Bernie people don't lose easily. I mean, at the last convention where he had lost and conceded and supported Hillary, there were problems at the convention with them, protesting and chanting and trying to, scream out the speakers. So at something like this, I just think it'll be the epic, undignified event.
Yeah, it's interesting, Bill, that the Democrats are doing exactly what Republicans didn't do in 2016. They all saw the Donald Trump thing coming, but there was a prisoner's dilemma going on, and none of them wanted to get out because they all wanted that one-on-one shot. And ultimately, none of them got that shot until it was way too late. This, at least, to me, is learning those lessons, and that's why Pete Buttigieg and Amy Klobuchar are getting out in advance. They're doing what they can to avoid either a Sanders nomination or a brokered, a contested convention. And what will be interesting in the aftermath of Tuesday is that's the first time we're going to really see, is it a 2-person race?
Or a 3-person.
Or a 3 or 4 even.
Might be at 4, right?
Right.
Could be a 4.
I mean, the issue, according to our forecast, the numbers say that there's basically no chance for Bloomberg or Warren to make it mathematically to a majority of delegates. You saw the Warren campaign actually basically admit this a couple of days ago when they put out this statement.
But she still wants to go to the convention.
Decided in Milwaukee, exactly. So she basically has admitted that her strategy is to win, in a contested convention. But I think, yeah.
The infuriating thing for me about the Warren-Sanders situation is they basically have all the same positions. On health care, she's on his bill, right? Yet she's plummeting and he's rising. And you have to ask yourself the question, how much of that is about sexism? How much of that is about her being the lefty woman and him being the lefty man, and it's not okay if you're a woman?
Yeah, it'll be interesting because she's still pitching herself as kind of the unity candidate. She said
Yes,
at the last
very
debate,
much.
Exactly.
hey, he's got all the right ideas, but I can actually get things done and I can bring the party together. So her calculation is you walk into Milwaukee in a contested convention with a chunk of delegates that are yours, and you could say, look, I'm not him and I'm not him. I'm the person that you could turn to turn that on your head. But you're exactly right. I mean, she is, a lot of people thought she would be where Bernie Sanders is right now, and it just didn't happen.
No.
So do you think that there's a possibility that both Bloomberg and Warren, if Bloomberg does not do so well tomorrow, can continue to go towards the convention, really thinking that they have the legitimate ability to be the compromise candidate?
Mike has gajillions of dollars, so he can go as long as he wants to go. It's an equation we've never seen before.
He could keep doing ads.
Nothing stops him?
What stops him?
Nothing. He doesn't have to worry about. I mean, listen, Klobuchar and Buttigieg, they had to stop because the donors aren't going to give them any money anymore.
This is sock money for Mike Bloomberg, you know what I mean? So he can keep doing it. I credit him again for saying he'll do it no matter who it is, but there's nothing to stop Mike Bloomberg except for Mike Bloomberg.
But that's all on the theory, Christine, that he doesn't think Biden is really up to it, which a lot of Democrats worried early on in the summer during those first debates. That's exactly what Democrats thought. He doesn't have his mojo anymore.
Can I say something? We all thought that. I thought it. I expressed public disappointment in him. Get over it. I almost cursed. Get over it.
Can't do that on the internet.
Get Olympia Dukakis, smack us in the face. Get over it. The man overcame the problem. We're moving forward. Perfection is not a guarantee in politics.
I do want to talk a little bit about Biden on two things. First, before I want to bring in our embed from ABC News, Molly Nagel, but I want to, as a prelude, play for our audience 2 bites, if I could, Caitlin. Biden on Buttigieg and what he thinks is going to happen, and Biden on what's going to happen on Super Tuesday, and then we can go into Molly, and you're on the screen, Molly. Take a listen to what we're going to play. 2 bites, Biden on Super Tuesday, Biden on Buttigieg, and then let me get your reaction.
Do you think him dropping out of the race makes your path forward on Super Tuesday a little bit easier?
He was a real competitor. He's a real competitor, and I think it probably does. If I were president, I'd very much like to see him part of whatever I do. The circumstance I have is whether or not I've been able to campaign or do a lot of advertising in those states. I'm fairly well known, and I think people know who I am. It doesn't mean that I win. It just means that I think I'm in the game. I don't know that I can win Super Tuesday, but I think that I'll be viable.
Molly Nagel in Dallas with the Biden campaign. Molly, you have been with his campaign as an embed for ABC News while he was riding high as the front runner, while he was down low and everyone was basically writing his political obit, and now where he's right in the thick of things again after Saturday's South Carolina primary election. What's it been like? What's it like right now? What do you think he's thinking? And what is going to happen tonight with Buttigieg and Klobuchar there to endorse him?
Well, it's been really quite a ride here. As you mentioned, Joe Biden came into this race really as the front runner from the start. He has always been near the top of the polls. There's always been intense interest in his campaign and intense interest in what he does. Now, we definitely saw a dip in that enthusiasm around Iowa and New Hampshire. There's the saying, you don't know what you don't know. Going in those events in New Hampshire and Iowa, you don't know that you don't recognize the lack of enthusiasm until you see enthusiasm like we've been seeing over the last couple of days. There has been much bigger crowds for Joe Biden since that massive win in South Carolina. He had over 2,000 people at his rally in Virginia last night. His victory celebration following the South Carolina win. I talked to several people there who came from all across the state because they wanted to be a part of that victory. So there's clearly a big change here. Tonight, it's going to be a big night for him as well. Big endorsements coming his way. You know, Amy Klobuchar going to be definitely joining him here. Pete Buttigieg, and another big endorsement. This is something that is going to be quite the night for Joe Biden that he really needs going into Super Tuesday.
Molly, what are you hearing from the so-called donor class? Because before Iowa, around Iowa, we'd heard that the donor class was getting concerned and maybe pulling back from Joe. Have you heard, if that was true, have you now heard the opposite?
Well, when I talked to donors about if they had any nerves about Joe Biden following those disappointing leaves, they always said that, you know, that's part of the game. Everybody's nervous when you're a donor because you're making an investment in a person. So I think now that there's a bit of wind at his sails, there's probably going to be a lot more enthusiasm for Joe Biden. His super PAC obviously is looking to gain momentum as well, looking to get their coffers up so that they can continue to be competitive through this. But I think that with Pete Buttigieg also getting out of the race, obviously he was another person who did a lot of those fundraising opportunities, and I could see where a lot of Pete Buttigieg donors also now turn their attention and their focus to Joe Biden in order to make sure that they have a candidate that they believe in and is viable.
Hey Molly, it's Rick Klein. I'm curious what you're picking up about how this campaign is building out over this extraordinary couple of days. They had nowhere near the infrastructure, nowhere near the number of field offices, nowhere near the number of organizers of some of the other candidates, Bloomberg and Sanders in particular. Are they doing any of that on the fly with the money that they're bringing in, or are they just hoping for momentum to carry the day for Joe Biden tomorrow?
You know, I think there's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B going on here. You're absolutely right. The Biden campaign was extremely cagey when I would ask them about what their staffing levels were like in Super Tuesday states when we were in South Carolina. They said only that they were in the high double digits and that they would be growing as South Carolina ended and they moved staff into those places. Now that's talking about paid staff there. But there's also a question about the organization in general, and they just haven't been able to match Bernie Sanders and Michael Bloomberg. I think that a lot of this is, you kind of get the sense that they're building the plane as it's taking off, that there's this new momentum, there's new people dropping out, that there's a lot of unknowns that they're just trying to roll with as this goes on. And they've always talked about needing that big momentum from South Carolina in order to project them into Super Tuesday. Joe Biden himself told our Eva Pilgrim last night that they're going to be adding new people, that there's a lot of talented people from campaigns that are now going to be available. He said he's happy with his core staff, but he's going to be working on building out that infrastructure on the ground to make sure that he can stay competitive going forward if Super Tuesday goes his way.
Nathaniel?
Hey Molly, this is Nathaniel Rakich from 538. I was curious, you know, in that video clip, Biden said that he doesn't think he's going to win Super Tuesday, but according to our forecast, he's favored in all of the southern states pretty much, which I think would be covered as a pretty big win for him. Do you get the sense that he was just being kind of trying to lower expectations, or do they actually think they're not going to do very well?
You know, I get the sense from the campaign that they maybe agree that Bernie Sanders is probably going to come out on top here when it comes to Super Tuesday, but that doesn't mean that they don't think that they're going to do well. You also heard Joe Biden say that he thinks he's going to be viable coming out of Super Tuesday, so that obviously indicates that he thinks he's going to get quite a bit of delegates, and they do think that they do well, particularly in those southern states. Those are states that play to Joe Biden's benefits, and they feel if they can do well enough in Super Tuesday states like the southern states, that then opens up a pathway to them to states beyond Super Tuesday that are also favorable to Joe Biden, including places like Georgia and Florida. Those are going to be important parts of his strategy going forward. So I think the name of the game here is staying in step with Senator Sanders and making sure that the delegate count stays within a margin that is catchable.
Molly, he hasn't been, Mr. Biden has not been going around to a lot of Super Tuesday states, and he's gotten some criticism for it because the other candidates have made their rounds. Why not? What's his explanation for that?
Well, you heard his explanation there in that clip with Eva.
Yeah.
He talked about how he has nearly universal name recognition. He says that he has been spending time in states. Now, I think that's a bit of a dubious claim. He's had 2 events in North Carolina, 2 events in Virginia. He's had a couple more events in Texas and in California, but a lot of fundraisers outnumber the number of public events he's done in those states. So as much as he wants to say he has been on the ground, it's true, but has he been on the ground enough? I think that's the question.
The reason
he's really banking on the fact that as a former vice... Oh,
go ahead. No, go ahead. As a former vice president, he has name recognition. But
as a former vice president, he has name recognition, yeah.
The reason I bring it up, and I should have said it in the first part of the question, is, you know, it sort of reminded me of what Donald Trump criticized for Hillary Clinton for not doing, and that is hitting the ground in those key toss-up states in the last month of the campaign, and it did hurt her. I don't think there's any question about that.
I think think that's a good and interesting point. Joe Biden is acutely aware of Hillary Clinton not paying attention to the states that she failed to visit, like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, those states that are going to be firewalls. And he says that those are states that he's going to perform particularly well in. I think another element of this that we maybe need to consider is that Joe Biden really was not looking good coming out of Iowa and New Hampshire. He needed big wins in Nevada or even just good finishes in Nevada and South Carolina. And so I got the sense from the campaign that it was a focus on the task at hand, and we will worry about Super Tuesday when we get there. They even moved staff out of Super Tuesday states in order to help in Nevada and South Carolina. So I think it was a matter of getting to Super Tuesday as opposed to trying to plan ahead for Super Tuesday.
Okay, Molly, thank you. I should stand by and pay attention to what we're going to talk about back here. We'll get back to you right at the end for a quick prediction of what's going to happen tomorrow. Molly raised just a whole bunch of points. I want to go to you. You said something to Christine earlier. What's wrong with the brokered convention? You got some gleam in your eyes there, and you smiled because you think it's going to be kind of fun. You've never seen one.
Well, yeah, I mean, and nobody, very few people who are alive have seen one. It would be an historic event, and certainly as a journalist, I'd be excited to cover it.
The Democrats the last time, was it Adlai Stevenson?
Yeah, 1952 was the last time they went to multiple ballots. And look, the whole idea of brokered, we don't even know who the brokers are or whether they can broker.
Well, that's true. That's true.
They're people, smoke-filled room people like Christine Quinn right here who become very, very. But it's not clear how.
But there are those people that kind of back day of bosses and whatever. That doesn't exist anymore.
Well, and what's interesting too is in movies and TV shows, when you see a broker convention, you see people negotiating over huge groups and like states all voting the same way, but that's not
that
true
doesn't happen anymore either. That's true.
Controlling a delegation,
it's really
not
one
the same,
by one, choosing each individual.
And then here's the other part of that. I mean, we're way ahead of ourselves, of course, because who knows what's going to happen. But Biden supporters are much more likely to go to Sanders than Sanders supporters are likely to go to Biden. Or at least that's what the appearance is.
I don't think Biden's. Well, look, if Sanders was the nominee, yes, the Biden people.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to lose any. I think where the Sanders people go after the last election is a very
Some of them went to Donald Trump.
And some didn't vote.
Some didn't vote.
Yeah, and I think the emphasis will be on a running mate. Joe Biden's going to have to find someone that appeals to a segment of the party that is not his natural base.
Right.
I think there's going to be a lot of attention paid to that. You already heard we heard the vice president signaling about a big role for Pete Buttigieg and some of his other former rivals. I think he's going to have to nod to that portion of the party. We saw it in the exit polls in South Carolina to that exact point that fewer of the Sanders supporters were willing to say they would definitely support the nominee than supporters of virtually everyone else.
Which is a danger. And so foolish. It was foolish 4 years ago. It's foolish again. You can't, when you're running for president of the United States, particularly in this crisis, be self-centered in any way. You have to put the country first. That's what Pete and Amy did yesterday and today.
Well, let's talk about that. We didn't really explore that as much as we might have. We had a couple minutes left, and then I want to play a couple clips. I want to end this on Bloomberg and then go back to Molly and get all your opinions about what's happening tomorrow. But this is a very big deal, I think. Expand on what you were just saying.
Well, look, Pete, because he had money, more so than even Amy, could have dragged this on, right? And he's eloquent and he's exciting, and he could have brought more people to his side.
But he was thinking of his future, too, and the country's future.
Absolutely. But I think more and more with Pete, look, his election is historic. It will have saved lives of LGBTQ young people, no question. He did a great service to the country, and then he stepped back and said, what really is my path here, and what's the path for the party and the country, and that's more important.
But he wouldn't have known that, I guess, when South Carolina happened. But it was too late to take him off the ballot, right? So what happens to the people who take those delegates? His delegates, it's very complicated.
Yeah,
it is complicated.
The delegates for Klobuchar and Sanders, Klobuchar and Biden.
And Buttigieg.
Names are confused here.
Buttigieg and Klobuchar.
It's early for that. Yeah, so the two candidates that drop out, some of their delegates go back to the pool of in the state, and they get redistributed before you even move forward. Some of them continue to be pledged to Buttigieg and Klobuchar. Klobuchar.
Give them.
You can give them, and they're essentially they're versions of superdelegates, which is on the first ballot. They're free agents, but yes, you'd assume that Buttigieg is going to pick people who are going to be loyal to him and his wishes. So there's at least tiny numbers that you can move.
Any odds about that? Have you done any odds?
We don't forecast the human element.
Of course not. This is Mr. Spock. It's right?
Exactly. Only the most
That's
logical.
such a great line.
Let me move on to Bloomberg for a second. Today he spoke to AIPAC. He went blasted Bernie Sanders for this. Again, Bloomberg trying to cast himself as, much like Elizabeth Warren's going to cast herself, as the person ready to step in and solve the big division in the party and offer détente. Let's listen to Bloomberg today at AIPAC, trashing Sanders.
Senator Sanders has spent 30 years boycotting this event. And as you've heard by now, he called AIPAC a racist platform. Well, let me tell you, he's dead wrong. Calling it a racist platform is an attempt to discredit those voices, intimidate people from coming here, and weaken the U.S.-Israel relationship.
And if we could, Caitlin, if we could run now the next SOT, the sound on tape, about what Bloomberg talking about Super Tuesday. Oh, I'm sorry. That was Sanders talking about Super Tuesday. Let me not do that then first. I thought it was Bloomberg. On my note, it says Bloomberg, so it's my mistake. Let's talk about this a little bit, because he's blasting Sanders, who went back, as you said on Up Close this last weekend. We're going to negotiate the role of Fidel Castro back in 1959. There is some living in the past there.
Oh my gosh! I mean, look, Bloomberg has made it clear that he thinks that that Bernie Sanders is a disaster for the party. The question is what he does about it. Now, does he continue to fund his own campaign that way, or does he essentially turn himself personally into a super PAC on behalf of Joe Biden and against Bernie Sanders in addition to against Donald Trump? It's a critical decision that he's going to be faced with, I think, on Wednesday. I think the campaign recognizes that Joe Biden's momentum is something real, and that changes the dynamics. He was banking on Joe Biden to look weak at this moment, and then he'd be able to train his fire on Bernie Sanders and emerge as the alternative. Some of the calculations worked early on, but the last couple of weeks have not been good ones for Mike Bloomberg, and that's the reality that he faces come tomorrow.
I think that's right.
And you don't think he doesn't have any reason to stop if he doesn't want to?
No, unless, look, I believe Mike Bloomberg is someone who really wants the best for this country and is really profoundly offended and angered by Donald Trump. So there's nothing to stop him unless he decides to put the good of the country.
What happens, and I don't know, you don't have, this is the human element, so Nathaniel, you can't weigh in on this, but you're welcome to if you want to. If they've trashed him. Some of these guys have really trashed him. Buttigieg trashed him. He was not going to give his support to Bloomberg. Will he support? He funded? He did in large part help the Democrats take over the Congress in 2018. Is he going to continue to put funding in that, in a party that, where the leaders trashed him?
In the Bernie Sanders party. Bernie Sanders' campaign has said they don't want his help. Now, they don't actually control that. I think it becomes a major question for Mike Bloomberg, because he says that he is dead set on making sure that Donald Trump is not reelected. But the way that they have tangled in highly personal terms, I think raises that question about whether you want to keep throwing that money if you're told your money isn't welcome there. Now, it's possible that Bernie Sanders doesn't need it. He is the one candidate who doesn't have money problems other than Mike Bloomberg, because he's got an online army that can raise basically unlimited sums.
And that's changed the equation of fundraising in presidential
Absolutely.
Yes, it has.
Look, I think if Bernie Sanders is the nominee and he doesn't like Mike's money, then Mike will put his money more into the House and the Senate and maybe local races.
Or just trashing Donald Trump. I mean, you can carpet bomb Trump anywhere you want. Yeah.
But he made a commitment. He made a commitment on national television that he would do this. He did it unsolicited, as I recall. So I don't think there's any way he's going to back off of that commitment.
All right, before I start asking opinions about what's going to happen, let's roll that Bernie Sanders bite, because I think, really, if you listen to it carefully, he's taking a page out of the Donald Trump playbook, and it's a little like draining the swamp. Take a listen.
We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow on Super Tuesday. Our campaign is the strongest campaign to defeat Trump. There is a massive effort trying to stop Bernie Sanders.
And he says the establishment are not going to support me. They don't want Bernie Sanders. You substitute the theory of that with Trump I'm going to drain the swamp, and it's scaring the heck out of the establishment.
Yeah, and he's not wrong that the establishment's scared of him. I think where he oversteps is in attacking the corporate media. He's been attacking the Washington Post in very visceral terms.
So does Donald Trump.
Very Trumpian.
Right.
Well, there's a lot of similarities in the rise of Bernie Sanders and the rise of Donald Trump.
Both of them can get crowds and rally emotions like nobody else in the race.
Yeah, and that's not nothing in politics.
No,
I mean, the other
it's
Democrats
huge.
would love to be able to pack an arena like Bernie Sanders has. I mean, the same day that he was losing in South Carolina, he got 20,000 plus people across 2 different rallies.
Exactly.
And he could do that almost anywhere in the country.
But I think one of the things Bernie forgets when he's rallying about the establishment, whatever that is, and media, et cetera, is there are people who are for Joe Biden, people who have a more moderate perspective. They are not made up, they're not fake. He needs to be careful that in trashing the establishment and the media, et
drive their
cetera,
way.
he doesn't insult them and their intelligence.
And your thoughts about Bernie Sanders?
Yeah, I also think another thing about him is that we always hear from him that he's going to turn out a new kind of voter
Yes.
and win in a new way. But so far, we haven't really seen that in these primaries so far. You haven't seen a huge increase in youth turnout the way that Sanders maybe would have predicted. In fact, in places like South Carolina, you saw black turnout be very good for Biden. You saw
Younger.
suburban voters, turning out.
But there are a lot of young people who
Sanders
support
coalition.
Bernie Sanders, to be sure. Let me get your predictions. Molly Nagel in Dallas with the Biden campaign. I want to start with you. What do you think is going to happen tomorrow? I know you know what the Biden prediction is, and are they trying, as Nathaniel said, to sort of lower expectations? What's your take? What's your prediction?
You know, I got to be honest with you. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I think that anybody who knows what's going to happen is maybe saying more than they should. But I think that what's going to be really interesting to watch is what Joe Biden does with his day. He only has one event on the schedule right now for tomorrow, and it's in LA at 5:30 Pacific time. Really nothing else on the day. So what is he going to be doing? Where is he going to be going? Where are we going to be traveling? They haven't really given us any guidance on that. So I think it'll be interesting to see where he spends his time. And if he does indeed spend all of his time in California, a state where he's not necessarily projected to be the winner, and what that says about their strategy on Super Tuesday.
Well, he's got to go forward, that's for sure. And California is an important state. There's no question about that. Let's go through your predictions. Nathaniel, what's your take?
So I think you're going to see a pretty stark regional divide on Super Tuesday. I think the 7 southern states that are voting, the most important of which are Texas, Biden is probably going to win, although Texas is a legitimate toss-up, and I think that could be decisive. And I think the rest of the states, particularly in the Northeast and in the West, that's basically Sanders territory. And I think you'll see California with its late counting ballots. I think you'll see Sanders actually extend whatever lead or non-lead he has.
Before I get Christine's opinion, does New York stay in play to April 28th as making a difference in this?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, we don't know if what the race will be like. It might be over by then, but if there are still 2 or 3 or 4 candidates in the race, yeah, probably.
Okay, Chris?
I think Bernie wins California handily. I don't think Bloomberg gets enough out of California to really have firm ground underneath him. I agree. I think Biden kind of sweeps the South. If he does really well in Texas, then it's a great Super Tuesday for Biden. And if he does okay, it's not a bad Super Tuesday. And I think the Northeast goes to Bernie. That's right.
Yeah, Texas is my pivotal state as well.
I agree.
mean, it's the second biggest state voting. It obviously it's a very diverse state, geographically diverse, a lot of different media markets. If Bloomberg was going to do some damage, he would have to do it there. But I think Biden's challenge there is to come out on top or very close, because Bernie Sanders is going to be the delegate leader almost certainly by the close of business when all those votes are counted. The question is, are we talking about a crazy margin, 300 plus delegates that becomes almost insurmountable? That's how other candidates in 2016 and 2008 ended up putting away the nomination after Super Tuesday. Or is it much narrower, within 100 delegates or so? That's a ball game. And that's a game where New Yorkers are going to matter quite a bit April 28th.
Who thought it would be this interesting? I'm not so sure a lot of people did think it would be this interesting. And it's absolutely fascinating.
It is.
There's no question. And then again, the basic debate is the heart and soul of the Democratic Party, what you do going forward, versus the other pragmatic position, how do you defeat Donald Trump? And that is at war with each other, those two philosophies, right down to the day people vote.
Well, I pray we're just in discussion with each other.
There you go, instead of a battle. Spoken like the vice chairwoman of the Democratic Party in New York, of course. All right, thank you so much, everybody. Rick Klein, Chris Quinn, Nathaniel Rakish, and Molly Nagel in Dallas. Molly, thank you so much for joining us with the Biden campaign. That's going to do it for this edition of The Countdown. We thank our guests. Thank you for watching. Tomorrow, make sure you stay with Eyewitness News and ABC News for Super Tuesday. Our special coverage begins 8 o'clock. We'll have a full wrap-up on Eyewitness News, of course, at 11 o'clock, and always on our website and online. Thank you all for watching tonight. We'll see you again for Eyewitness News tonight at 11 o'clock.